Where's your Christmas spirit?
Hello friends, happy holidays, and welcome to a special bonus episode of every Arnold movie ever. We're going to do a bit of a time jump here. Consider me your Ghost of Christmas future as we look ahead to 1996 and Arnold's Christmas classic, Jingle All The Way. When we last saw Arnold, his career was about to enter the stratosphere after the success of the Terminator. And now we're going to catch up with him at the end of his 10-year reign at the box office. A lot has happened in between Terminator and Jingle, and I'll be covering it all eventually, but for now, we're going to talk about where his career was in 1996. So if the Terminator was the beginning of Arnold's indomitable reign at the box office, this moment is effectively the end. As we'll trace in future episodes, the first major misstep of his career occurred in 1993 with Last Action Hero. He was just coming off the masterpiece Terminator 2 in 1991 at the absolute peak of his powers. So what does Arnold do? A meta-action comedy that became the biggest bomb of his career as a headlining star. The follow-up to his greatest achievement got steamrolled by Jurassic Park and gleefully attacked by critics. I cannot wait to talk about Last Action Hero because I think it was unfairly maligned by critics and way ahead of its time a couple years before Scream, but it very actively dinged Arnold's career in a way he never truly recovered. Yes, the following year, in 94, he reteamed with James Cameron for the massive hit True Lies, and we got Eraser in 1996, also a hit, but Last Action Hero became a bomb punchline and started to have a halo effect on the reception and quality of Arnold Schwarzenegger movies from here on out. Here's how Arnold felt.
I framed the criticism philosophically and tried to minimize the whole thing. I had all kinds of movie projects lined up. True Lies, Eraser, Jingle All The Way. Enough to feel confident that one movie going in the toilet would have no impact on my career or on the money I made or on anything real.
And that's the only time Jingle All The Way is even mentioned in Arnold's book. But it's clear Arnold was aware of the effect of Last Action Hero, and he tried to counteract that by adding as many projects as he could and staying busy. The script, written by Randy Kornfeld, was originally darker and way more cynical towards consumerism. It was based on the Cabbage Patch Kids toy craze of the 80s. Then Chris Columbus, King of Christmas, had a similar experience trying to find a Buzz Lightyear toy in 1995, and he jumped on board this project as producer. Then Arnold came on board, and that's when a lot of things started to change. Kornfeld originally saw someone like a Steve Martin in the Arnold Schwarzenegger role, and once Arnold came aboard, they had to rewrite the whole thing and tailor it to Arnold's strengths. This is his fourth comedy after Twins, Kindergarten Cop, and Junior, and it would end up being his last for 21 years, if you count this thing. He was reportedly paid $20 million, which for someone like me, who's still at the point in his career where he got his first $1 million paycheck, it's an astonishing leap. So they had Arnold as star, Chris Columbus as producer, and they hired Brian Levant as director. Now, Levant had experience in the kids space directing Flintstones and Beethoven. And knowing he made those movies helps understand why this movie is the way it is. Filming took place all over Minnesota, including the Mall of America, which you may remember from the debut of WCW Nitro 7 months prior, for those of you who care about that. Minnesota loved having film crews there. They also did Grumpy Old Men, and according to this oral history of Jingle All The Way from a local Minnesota website, originally producers were pushing for Chicago, but Arnold wanted to go to Minnesota because he loved the Mall of America. And that idea is so funny to me. No, we have to go to the city with the big mall. It has an indoor roller coaster. I want to ride the indoor roller coaster. It's fantastic. The movie opens with a Power Rangers type show, Turbo Man, and reveals Arnold's son Jamie watching at home. Turbo Man is both his hero and mentor. Basically, Turbo Man is the Qui-Gon Jinn to Jamie's Anakin Skywalker. And much like Anakin Skywalker, Jamie doesn't really have a father, because Howard, Arnold's character, is too busy working at the office selling mattresses or something. Arnold is going to be late for Jamie's karate tournament, and luckily, this movie came out in 1996. Otherwise, Arnold could have taken all these calls on his cell phone and easily made the tournament. Filling Arnold's absence is his neighbor Ted, a divorcee played by Phil Hartman, as a slimier version of Ned Flanders, who has all the women in town swooning over him. But he's angling to get with Howard's wife, which seems ill-advised considering A, she's married, and B, to a giant tree trunk of a man. But for now, he's there for Liz, played by Rita Wilson, in a thankless role as the wife who has to get increasingly upset with her husband, but not too upset, even when he's caught starting a fire and stealing a gift. So it just ends up coming across as incredibly unrealistic. Howard gets stuck in traffic trying to make the tournament, and in just the first 5 minutes, commits one of the most atrocious, detestable crimes against humanity that exists. It's so unforgivably selfish and awful that it's impossible to redeem this character. While he's stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, he jumps on the shoulder and tries to cut the line and bypass everyone. Now, I don't know if you've ever been stuck in traffic on the freeway before and seen someone do this, as if they have some special privilege and feel like they're better than every other person sitting stuck in the exact same situation. But there is a special place in hell for those people. Being stuck in traffic without being able to do a goddamn thing about it like the rest of us. This was a situation of Howard's own creation. It wasn't an accident. It's not an emergency. He neglected his son, and now he doesn't want to suffer the consequences. This is the most immoral character Arnold has ever played. At least with the Terminator, it didn't have a choice but to kill. It was part of its programming. Here, Howard has free will, and he actively chooses to be a line cutter. He's also a bad father, but line cutting jumps to the front of the line as far as horrible offenses go. Luckily, he does get pulled over by a cop, so at least there are consequences for his actions. Howard tries to apologize to Jamie for missing karate by doing some casual racism that doesn't work, so he promises to buy him a Turbo Man action figure. Now he has to scramble on Christmas Eve to find the hottest toy of the season. Then we get our first interaction with Howard and Ted. Ted has either rented, bought, or stolen a reindeer for his son. They don't clarify. And Howard fucking hates Ted.
You might want to wrap some chains around those tires.
Maybe we should wrap some chains around you.
What?
But since Howard is so unlikable, at this point, honestly, I'm not really sure who to root for. Like, Ted doesn't seem like such a bad guy. He loves his son, we know that. He's just a little smarmy. Now, this movie also has some of the worst snow you will see in a Christmas movie. That's because it was shot in July, but also, according to the location manager Ann Healy Shapiro, the LA special effects people used potato flakes to make snow. Nobody uses potato flakes. If it rains, it gets all gummy. These guys! The best guy who does snow is from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Then we go outside the toy store to meet Myron, played by Sinbad, a mailman who rails against crass consumerism.
They spend billions of dollars on TV advertisement, and then they sit there and use subliminal messages to suck your children's minds out.
Yet still needs to get this toy to buy his son's affection. Arnold's performance here is way over the top, and I assume he was trying to match Sinbad's energy. Apparently Sinbad improvised a lot of his lines, so Arnold had to improv as well. And you can tell, he's on a tightrope here, and he's wobbling. Then the doors to the store open, everyone rushes in for a Turbo Man, but they're sold out, and then Howard and Myron get laughed at because you think you're going to get this on Christmas Eve? One thing I will say about this movie is that they tried to give Arnold a couple memorable kindergarten cop-style lines, and one of them happens here.
Where's your Christmas spirit? That's better.
And I think the movie needed more of that. It's the only times that he's endearing. And then things devolve. We get our first taste of the Chris Columbus influence and some good old-fashioned Home Alone violence that at this point was 6 years too late. Myron attacks Howard and instantly becomes the villain. Well, kind of. We're still supposed to root for him at different times in the movie. He makes himself sympathetic, and then he's awful. It's weird. The character's weird. I blame the improv because it just feels all over the map. So Howard strikes out and he calls home, but he finds Ted eating Howard's cookies. And we get another memorable line.
Put that cookie down! Now!
And unlike I'll Be Back in Terminator, which is so great in context, a lot of these lines are actually better out of context. They make for better memes than in the context of the movie itself. Now, Howard overhears that the mall may have some Turbo Man action figures, but he runs afoul of the police officer from earlier. He's played by Robert Conrad of Wild Wild West, the TV show that is. And the running gag is that the cop keeps getting accosted by Arnold in different ways. Then we arrive at what amounts to an in-movie commercial for the Mall of America. And I don't think this is some brilliant meta-commentary. I think Arnold just wanted to ride that roller coaster. But the funny thing about it is, it's not a great commercial for Mall of America. They jack up the price of the remaining Turbo Mans due to supply and demand and create a frenzy by throwing lottery balls into a massive crowd. Howard chases his ball, which ends up in the hands of a child who he then chases through an indoor jungle gym. And it leads to another one of those great meme quotes.
I'm not a pervert. I just was looking for Turbo Man doll.
Eventually he gives up, but he gets called over by his old Red Heat buddy, Jim Belushi, playing a mall Santa. Now this is my favorite little section in the movie. The mall Santa takes Howard to a warehouse where all the mall Santas have a racket going. They try to bilk him for $300 and give him a knockoff Turbo Man. This mall Santa cartel is great, and I kind of wish the whole movie was about just them. Unfortunately, that goodwill evaporates pretty quickly because we got to get into more Home Alone violence when Howard assaults Belushi and beats the absolute dog shit out of like 30 Santas. We get a couple of cameos here from Vern Troyer and The Big Show, known at the time as The Giant because he was still in WCW. I wonder if he ever left Minnesota. And then this elf, played by Danny Woodburn, who you may also remember as Mickey from Seinfeld, tases Arnold. Now, the director originally wanted the elf to bite Arnold's butt, but Danny had some integrity, and he didn't want little people portrayed that way. He asked Arnold if he thought it was funny, and Arnold said, "Yeah, Danny, it's funny, do what you want, I don't care," because Arnold's just thinking about that roller coaster. And so Danny pitched the taser, and the biting was out. Good for him. And up until this point, most of the story progression has been motivated by Arnold's quest to find Turbo Man. But this is a turning point for the movie. Suddenly, things just happen as a course of convenience rather than being driven by the main character's motivations. For instance, while Arnold is in this warehouse, the cops raid it at the exact same time. After that, Arnold runs out of gas, so he stops at a diner, and who happens to coincidentally be there? Myron. It's a script of conveniences, and it only gets worse as it goes on. Myron and Howard share stories about how everyone hates them for working too hard and being absent fathers. And honestly, all of this could have been solved by just spending time with their kids rather than running all over town trying to buy their affection. And that's kind of the moral of the story, but no one actually learns that lesson. Or they don't earn that lesson, at least. We do finally get a brief, strong performance from Arnold here, and it's something we needed actually much earlier to connect with him.
Couldn't find the kid at all. Does that make me a bad father? No. But yelling at him for no good reason, now that makes me a bad father.
It's too late at this point, but it's nice that it's in there. The next convenience occurs when the radio in the diner announces they're giving away a Turbo Man doll to the first caller. Myron and Howard's truce is broken up by more slapstick, and then they race to the radio station to grab the doll. Now, this is where Sinbad commits his first federal crime, obstruction of correspondence, by destroying other people's mail, because apparently he's still on the clock. Arnold beats him to the radio station and accosts Martin Mull. He breaks through glass and just everything's so loud. Oh my god. Help me! Sinbad then shows up and threatens to commit domestic terrorism with a homemade bomb, and this is officially the point where the movie loses me. This would all make for great satire, but the movie is pitched as a family comedy. These aren't good, rational people pushed to their breaking point. They're bad people from the start, so it's unclear what message they're trying to send. This bomb ended up being fake, thank you, but guess what? When they get caught by the cops, Sinbad hands them an actual bomb, making him officially a domestic terrorist because the bomb goes off. Yes, it blows up in the cop's face. And at this point, it seems, just as I have, Howard has given up. He returns home, but finds Ted putting the star on Howard's tree. And apparently that's Howard's thing, but we just find out about it, so who cares? So Howard decides he's going to go steal the Turbo Man Ted bought for his son. This leads to a crisis of conscience and a lot of exterior monologuing to no one.
That son of a... I'm out all day, and he's in my house, putting up my star on my tree.
I'll show him.
What am I doing? Look at me. Stealing from a kid? I can't do this. You're gonna go back.
And, like many other scenes, this one ends with loud yelling and slapstick violence. Ted's reindeer attacks Howard, starts a fire in the house, and leads to Liz catching Howard. This is the point where he realizes he messed up and decides he has to take responsibility as a father, which is great, except that's not what happens at all. Ted drives Liz and the kids to a big parade Howard promised he would go to, and then Ted and Liz prove that they're also irresponsible parents because they just drop the kids off at the parade by themselves while they go park the car and Ted tries to assault Liz. But, you know, in a funny way. And then, in the ultimate unearned moment, the moment that Howard should have been proactive, he just stumbles into the staging area for the parade and is shoved into the Turbo Man suit. Again, did nothing on his own. This is 100% an accident. He's sent out into the parade. Now, Jamie is sulking in the audience, blaming himself for his father not loving him, which is a truly fucked up moment that just gets brushed over when Howard is allowed to handpick a kid from the audience to give out a Turbo Man doll, and Howard, of course, cherry picks his son. We then discover both Howard's son and his wife have face blindness because they don't recognize this very recognizable person at all. Now, Sinbad attacks the guy playing Turbo Man's nemesis, and they have this big special effects driven action sequence in the middle of the parade. The special effects they're out of control. It is, this part, just look at this part, where he runs into a wall and gets like weirdly stuck there. It's so straight. This was a $75 million movie. Eventually Howard thwarts Myron, who's just lost his damn mind, but then Howard's son gives Myron the Turbo Man, despite the fact that Myron nearly got the kid killed. What is the message here? Howard reveals himself to his family finally, and they're like, whoa, oh my god, Dad! And Jamie loves him again. Great, well, what's the message there? And then the movie ends abruptly, so abruptly, in fact, that the credits start halfway up the screen, as if they're trying to sneak the fuck out of here without anyone seeing who was responsible for this mess. And then it's over. Unless you're like me, and you accidentally let the credits run, and you discover there's a post-credits sequence. Ooh, take that, Marvel. Arnold is able to finally put the star on the tree, and they set up a sequel where Rita Wilson says, if you went through all that trouble for our son, what did you get me? And of course we know he's a shit person, so he got her nothing. If you're looking for a Christmas movie to give you that warm, fuzzy spirit of the season, look elsewhere. Jingle All The Way strains to hit any emotional targets and struggles with a conflicting message on the evils of consumerism. The emotional center is slapdash and the slapstick is exhausting. I think it's a great premise, but the execution is flawed. There is satire in Howard being a bad dad who exerts more effort buying his son's affection with a toy than earning it, and never quite learning the right lesson, but too much of it seems unintentional. Howard starts in a place where it's difficult to follow him on his journey. I'm not rooting for him to get the toy. He deserves to feel the sting of his child's scorn. My pitch on this movie would be to make Howard more relatable and less absent. His kid actually loves him, but he also wants this toy, so Howard, loving his son, he gets sucked into the thrill of the hunt and slowly unravels. Then you could show how these toys are marketed for maximum impact, shorted on supply to create demand, and due to the addictive pool of consumerism surrounding the holidays, Howard convinces himself this is the only way to truly make his son happy, explaining why people lose their goddamn minds and trample over each other for a piece of plastic. Sinbad's character is inconsistent to the point of incoherence. Again, I put a lot of that on the improv. One moment we're expected to be on his side as he rails against crass consumerism. The next, he's pulling out a bomb. If the idea here was that he and Howard are good people corrupted by the wrong reasons for the season, it needed more time to simmer in the story. He gives that speech, and then a minute later he's trampling people to get a Turbo Man. Now, Phil Hartman is great, one of the best, gone too soon, very entertaining in this role, but he exists solely to make Arnold more sympathetic. Rita Wilson is given nothing to do but look disappointed. And look, there are things that I like. I swear. I said I like the premise of the movie. I think it's great. There's fertile ground here. And I think the Mall Santa counterfeit ring is a really funny concept. I wish there was more of that kind of stuff. I know I talked trash about A Christmas Story a few episodes ago, so I guess I owe it a bit of an apology, because if given the choice between the two movies about the power of consumerism, I'd pick A Christmas Story. It has a similar message. It does a better job playing up the satirical aspects, especially once the toy Ralphie was obsessed with ends up hurting him. When it comes to Arnold's performance, it is truly stunning to go from the still, cold, calculated performance in the Terminator to the broad, harried, frantic, eyeball-bulging, grasping at straws, almost desperate performance in Jingle All The Way. It's mind-blowing that this is the same actor. He gets one nice scene where he puts in a little bit of a subtle performance, but since it's happening in the middle of a live-action Itchy and Scratchy cartoon, it's too little too late. And this is a movie star performance, not an acting performance. And I'll admit, there is a visceral joy in watching him yell things like, "Put the cookie down now!" It can be endearing when he overreacts. After all the research I've done, I know how much effort he puts into these performances. And here, he's trying his absolute hardest to make this work, but the script fails him. I can't wait to go back and chart his progress to see how he ended up going from what he does in the Terminator, which is astounding, to whatever I just saw. Jingle All The Way was destroyed by critics at the time of its release, but I always like to check in with Roger Ebert, who's usually more forgiving of Arnold. He gave it 2.5 stars, saying, "I liked a lot of the movie, but I was sort of depressed by its relentlessly materialistic view of Christmas and by the choice to go with action and mild violence over dialogue and plot." And he has the great sentence, "Schwarzenegger is eventually attacked by the reindeer and later makes up with it and gives it a beer in a scene that will not be used at his AFI tribute." Needless to say, that chilly reception extended to the box office. It opened on November 24th at number 4 with $12 million, losing out to my favorite Star Trek movie, Star Trek First Contact. Also, Space Jam was in its second week. Jingle stayed at number 4 for 2 more weeks, then got pummeled by new release after new release. Jerry Maguire, Mars Attacks, The Preacher's Wife, Beavis and Butthead Do America, Scream, and by Christmas weekend, it was pushed out of the top 10. Ultimately, it did gross $129 million worldwide against a $75 million budget, so it wasn't a total flop, it just did not do as well as they expected. The cast and crew have some strong feelings about it as well. Director Levant had this to say about Jingle All The Way: "It destroyed my career." In 2020, Rita Wilson said, "This is the movie that haunts me." Sinbad around 2017 said, "It was fun! We had a good time doing the movie." So, at least Sinbad had fun. And in years since, people have warmed to it a little bit. It's received a bit of a reappraisal simply because it's a Christmas movie. It airs constantly on cable, and it's more of an opportunity for people to see it in bits and pieces, giving them the illusion that the movie on a whole was good. But Levant does appreciate the reevaluation. "I'm so happy that it has found a place in people's hearts. It's become part of the national consciousness and a holiday tradition. Today I'm very proud of it, and that wasn't always the case." As someone who loves both Christmas movies and Arnold movies, you would think this would be the ultimate movie for me. But I didn't see it when it came out in 1996. I was 16, was trying to figure out how to be cool, still trying to figure that one out. And Jingle All The Way was a kid's movie, so I didn't bother. I didn't see it until years later, and retained very little outside of that Mall Santa bit and the absurd finale. This was a tough watch. I mean, it wasn't as bad as The Villain or Hercules in New York, anything like that. Like, nowhere near. It's very slickly made. But it just, watching it now, man, it's a disappointment. Because you hope, well, maybe a couple of years later, 20 years later, it's better. And it's just not. Following Jingle All The Way, Arnold jumped straight to Batman and Robin, playing Mr. Freeze in a performance held together entirely by ice puns. He was ridiculed for it at the time, even worse than Jingle All The Way, and his career would then shift into a new phase post-domination. All right, let's go to the stats. Acting chops, 4. Kill count, 0. Thank God. Catchphrase, "Put the cookie down now." The lingering damage from Last Action Hero, combined with 2 goofy back-to-back performances, knocked Arnold down a few pegs. But it also led to a more experimental phase for him, and one day we'll get into all of it. But for now, we gotta go back in time, 1985, for a cameo that was secretly turned into a full-on starring role without Arnold's knowledge in Red Sonja. Until then, enjoy the holidays, everybody. I'll see you next time. Oh, right. I should also mention, there is a sequel to Jingle All The Way. Jingle All The Way 2. It's very similar to other direct-to-video sequels. They basically recycle the plot with a C-list, Z-list actor and hope the brand recognition is enough to sell a few copies before it's shoved into the bargain bin. Jingle All The Way 2 stars Larry the Cable Guy and former WWE superstar Santino because, yes, Jingle All The Way 2 is a WWE film. I was writing at WWE when this was made, and I produced a live in-arena segment with Larry the Cable Guy, and in my 7.5 years there, writing and producing every type of segment and story, main event angles, mid-card, romance, comedy, this was, without a doubt, the worst thing I was associated with. Wrestling fans have a very contentious relationship with celebrities entering the world of WWE. The actors have to earn the wrestling fans' respect. They can automatically sniff out if a celebrity is looking down on wrestling or they're just there to sell a product. they will be dead in the water. But they can get over with that audience by being enthusiastic, playing along in the established world without breaking it, and most importantly, being a fan themselves and having even the most minimal knowledge of the current product. Larry the Cable Guy was enthusiastic, but his pitch was to come out on stage without a shirt, wearing a lucha libre mask, and acting like a wrestling star. But if you know anything about Vince McMahon, he has been trying to get as far away from that image of wrestling as possible. That's wrestling, not sports entertainment. Now, I tried to convince Larry the Cable Guy that this may not have the desired effect and the audience might see through it, but he felt it would be funny, and so the world got this.
Get her done!
I'm ready to wrestle here. I'm ready to wrestle there, Santino. I gave up a colonoscopy to come here tonight.
Of course, I end up taking the blame for it because I should have known better, and believe me, I knew better. But when comedy legend Larry the Cable Guy tells you he's going to go do something, you go let him do it.